Watch more, feel more. Dell.
Well, it's early in the tournament, but it is already a massive game for South Africa and the West Indies. It tends to be the format that we've got that if you lose 2 out of 2, then you are in trouble. You're catching up with the rest of the teams in the Super 12s. Our focus lies on South Africa against the West Indies. Both teams shall descend in Dubai in just under 20 minutes from now for what will be their second match after going down on the opening day of the Super 12s to Australia and England, respectively. This is Maruti Suzuki Presents ESPN Cricket for T20 Timeout, powered by Dell. It's a very good evening to Tom Moody and a very good morning in the early hours of Trinidad to Daren Ganga, who wasn't with us on the opening day of the opening game for the West Indies. And I think he'd be pretty pleased that he wasn't. Can't possibly do any worse than 55, Daren.
Indeed, and good day to all of you all, and to all of our viewers. The West Indies shocked everyone, stunned everyone with that effort against England. As we know in T20 cricket, things change quite quickly in terms of form and in terms of performances. So this West Indian team is no stranger to those things, and the entire West Indian public will be expecting a shift in form from this West Indian side. A little more cerebral approach, I would think. And you look at this team, potentially they must continue to play according to their strengths.
As it turns out, they're going to be batting first again. Would there be nerves in that camp? The tournament is always excited for a power-packed West Indies side, Tom Moody. All of a sudden, if they lose today or after what happened in the first game, are you worried if you're in that West Indies camp just yet?
Oh, look, they'll be anxious. They'll be shocked themselves to be blown out of the water like they were in that first game. There's a lot of experience in that side. So I think they'll draw on that experience. And I'll be very surprised if they change too much of their mindset, because the West Indies have played a brand of cricket that's been very successful in this format of the game for a long time. And they'll trust that brand. And more importantly, they'll trust the people that have been given the responsibility to carry that brand. We're not asking any of the players to play anything, different to what they have done successfully over recent times. I think what they just need to do is just be a little bit mindful of assessing conditions and just getting themselves set individually in their various roles within that batting order.
All right, now toss it on now. South Africa have won it, like I said. But even before we get to the impact of the toss, some massive news from Temba Bavuma, the South African captain. There is a change made by South Africa. It is not injury or tactical. Quinton de Kock has made himself unavailable for personal reasons. So Risa Hendricks comes in. And if you're just catching up with the news, about half an hour back, just before the start of this game, Cricket South Africa released a statement directing all players and staff to take the knee. We did see during the opening game that some of the members of the staff, as well as the players, did not take the knee. You can find a detailed piece by Firdos Munda on the side on that for the same. But one has to assume that it is perhaps a natural reaction to that, with Bavuma saying nothing more than he's made himself unavailable for personal reasons. Well, it's not what you want for a team. I'll get into the intricacies of the issue, and it is a sensitive issue. But Tom Moody, this is not what you want if you're South Africa.
Yeah, look, this is something you would hope that the South African team and the South African Cricket Board would have worked out well and truly in advance of this World Cup, without us really knowing the actual details around what the differences are, or the actual details of Quinton de Kock's stance on whatever it might be. It's very hard for us to speculate, but planning for World Cups happen months, if not years in advance. And, you need to make sure that every aspect of your planning is absolutely spot on. And clearly this is a huge bump in the road that has been that is certainly unexpected.
Yeah, I mean, let's be fair. We are nowhere are we questioning the cause? In fact, we know this is a movement that we all come together for, and the West Indies have led the way. Daren, I'm glad we've got you on this. Karen Pollard said so, that the team would take a knee. It's a movement that's gathered a popularity among the sports persons for the significance, the poignance that it is, and yet there are individuals that choose to refrain. Now, whatever the intricacies of the issue, one thing you would have wanted if you're South Africa is for it to be sorted out in advance. I guess a board press release half an hour before a massive game directing players doesn't help.
Doesn't help at all. And I think Tom hit the nail on the head in terms of the planning, in terms of the congruence that must have happened before a World Cup. And it's not only about the technical cricketing items. We saw in that 2016 World Cup, the West Indies players and the West Indies team, they were inspired by some of the loopholes that happened behind the scenes for them to go on to win that ICC T20 World Cup with a Daren Sammy-led West Indian team. This is not exactly what South Africa would want. Quinton de Kock is one of their best players, most prolific player, you would say, in this format of the game and at the top of the innings. And to not have his services before the start of a very important game, that will be a bit demoralizing. It will have a disjointed South African team going into this match against the West Indies. And it's quite unfortunate to see this happening to South Africa cricket.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you could read as much as you'd like about these issues that have been plagued, that South African cricket has been plagued with over the years. And yes, we do put a rider in this that all we know officially from Temba Bavuma is that de Kock made himself unavailable for personal reasons. So we'll probably have more on this story as it develops, as we hear more perhaps from Quinton de Kock, even who, at least noticeably in the last game, did not take the knee, as did a number of players in that South African setup. So we'll see how things goes. They have to try and focus on the game at hand. As far as the West Indies go, we were curious to see if they'd make a change. Lots of talk about Roston Chase and whether he makes this team, but there's just one change, Daren, and it seems to be a bowling change. Hayden Walsh comes in and Obed McCoy goes out. So they're going with spin and no room for Roston Chase. What do you make of that selection?
Well, I guess the conditions will dictate this decision for the West Indies. They might have thought that because it's a day game, a 2 p.m. local time start in the UAE, in Dubai, that they will get a little bit more from Hayden Walsh Jr. The one thing that I must say is Roston Chase has not played a T20 international match to date. So he's been brought into this West Indian side purely on the form that he's shown in the Caribbean Premier League. He scored 446 runs in this 2021 Caribbean Premier League. And I think sometimes you've got to give form a little more of a priority in circumstances. He's not been given the chance to play today against South Africa, but I think it's a missed opportunity for the West Indies. Given what transpired in that first game against England, he would have brought a little more stability to this batting lineup. I totally agree with Tom. The West Indies must continue to play to its strength, and that is to hit boundaries, to play aggressively, to be dominant. And I just feel sometimes you need a player like Roston Chase to complement that power in that batting order. It's not going to be the case today, but I think with Hayden Walsh Jr., we'll get an opportunity to see him and his form as a right-arm wrist spinner and his wicket-taking ability. I'm a little bit surprised that Obed McCoy misses out because he had a very good series against South Africa recently in the Caribbean when they played in a 5-match series. So only time will tell whether this strategic move will bring more rewards from a bowling perspective.
Yeah, I guess it's we'll come back to the Hayden Walsh and Obed McCoy one, Tom, but it would have been a tricky one. They had to have left out one of the openers to accommodate Roston Chase. You think at what point do you hold faith with the plan you went into a World Cup with, and at what point do you say no, we got it horribly wrong the first game, we must change it immediately, looking at the nature of the tournament?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of things there. There's obviously the fact that you don't want to panic change with your selection and your strategy. But the second part to that is that you also need to look at your opponent. And West Indies are playing South Africa, and South Africa boasts one of the fastest bowling attacks in this World Cup. And Roston Chase, and Daren will be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but he's not only a good player of spin, but what I have seen of him over recent years, he's a good player of pace bowling. So I think that is a consideration as well when you're looking at selection, is that yes, form, he's got form, which Daren touched on, but secondly, he's a good player, an all-round player of spin and also genuine pace. And one thing that has been a little bit vulnerable with the West Indies is their ability to play genuine pace. And I'm not talking 140, I'm talking upwards of 150, and that's a different league. And you could ask any player that's playing the modern game, that's when you're seriously challenged as a batsman. Your technique's challenged and your ability to be able to move the ball around with freedom.
Daren, you want to weigh in on that? The story of Chase is a unique one. wasn't looked at as a white ball player for a while, and now into this T20 squad. I thought if he's in this team, he plays in the 11. He's not one of those that you're waiting for an injury or a like for like replacement for someone. So what do you make of it?
Of course, and the fact that he scored a half century in that warm up game coming into this main phase of the World Cup, he is the informed guy. So you would think that the West Indies would rely on him to bring a little bit of stability to their batting. Again, it's a contrasting view by Phil Simmons, Karen Pollard. They are banking on their tried, tested players, and that of Chris Gayle, Shimron Hetmeyer, even Lendl Simmons at the top. Evan Lewis, he's been very, very prolific for the West Indies in T20 cricket. But I just feel that Chris Gayle has a role to play, very similar to what we saw in the past from a Marlon Samuels and to a lesser extent from a Dinesh Ramdin. Somebody who can attend to a batting crisis, get things back on track, and then allow players like the Karen Pollard, like the Andre Russell, to come and really express themselves. So it's a good asset to have in a T20 batting lineup. The West Indies has not chosen this option for this game against South Africa yet again.
All right. Now they're going to be batting first. One of the great debates in Chris Gayle's T20 career at this stage is whether he should still be batting in his preferred opening position. That's not where he's been batting in the IPL. That's not where the West Indies have used him recently too. But as we just look at numbers too, we ask ourselves another question, Tom. In light of what's happened, could that be a case? Could Gale opening have been a case only if they would have had room for Austin Chase, or is it one of those things that you can resort to at some point in this tournament? Even though Simmons and Lewis are your openers, that Chris Gale, if you need a fix, you need something different, that Gale could still bat up in the top two.
I personally feel, Chris Gale has spent 99% of his career as an opening bat, and he's done that incredibly successfully. That would be your preferred choice. But I'll also make the point that I don't think it's an absolute disaster, that shift from opening to batting 3. If we're having a discussion around him moving from an opener to batting 5, that's a different conversation. I think the move to 3 is not a significant one. I think the real point around Chris Gale is more to do with, is he still part of their best 11? Clearly, the West Indies think so, which is absolutely fine. But if that's the case, the discussion about Roston Chase is that, well, then he has to prize out one of the openers. And I would have thought that then puts enormous pressure on Lendl Simmons, who has come and gone out of this West Indies side over recent years. And if you're looking for balance and also looking to maintain that left-right combination at the top of the order, that would be the way to do it.
I think we know where the great Sir Curtly Ambrose stands on this, on whether Chris Gale automatically makes it into this 11. Where does Daren Ganga stand on this?
Well, it's a matter of value added, right? If Chris Gayle plays in this West Indies 11, he must add value, and his value is production of runs. He hasn't really produced the type of runs that he's produced in the past, so that expectation is always there on Chris Gayle to produce runs. So, I mean, he's been selected, he's been invested in throughout the home series in the build-up for this World Cup. So I'm not going to question his selection into this West Indian side. The real issue is, if Chris Gayle doesn't deliver in this game against South Africa, who will replace him? And it must be Roston Chase. So it's fine that they've invested in him yet again to play in this game against South Africa. Everyone in the Caribbean, they're hoping that Chris Gayle will come good and the West Indies will produce a win. But that's not the only focus. This West Indians team needs to fire all the way through its batting lineup. I believe Chris Gayle still could produce that innings that will give the West Indies a competitive advantage, and more so against South Africa, who he has a very good record against. So it's a matter of him delivering. If he doesn't, then by all means, Roston Chase should be in this batting lineup.
I've got my eye, the corner of my eye on the broadcast, which curiously lists Gale to open and Simmons to come at 3. So I'm just going to wait, because we'll know that in another 4 or 5 minutes as to what's actually gone on here. And we'll probably weigh in after we've seen who walks out to open the batting. But Tabraiz Shamsi will be a threat regardless. He's got an excellent record against the left-handers of the West Indies that extends from Lewis to Gale to even Nicholas Puran and Shimron Hetmar. You've already got the threat, Tom, of Rabada and Nokia, who's been outstanding in the UAE and still looks like he's carried his form from the IPL into the World Cup. Now, how do you suddenly inject caution and aggression to this team, to these batters that otherwise just want to go hard?
Yeah, look, I think Shamsi is one of the most underrated spinners in world cricket in this format of the game. He has boasted a very good career for South Africa since he's taken over the reins from Imran Tahir. He's a genuine wicket taker, and those numbers tell you a lot around where he prefers or who he prefers to bowl to, and that is the left-handers. Interesting point you make about the fact that it's showing on the screen that both the left-handers might open the batting in Lewis and Gale. If that's the case, Shamsi doesn't need to bowl in the power play. Markram will be given the ball, and he could easily burn 1 or 2 overs in that power play, because the off-spin is a major threat against the two left-handers, because Gale and Evan Lewis have both had their troubles against off-spin bowling in those power play overs.
And Markram does a steady job of it, Daren, doesn't he? He can bowl a couple of overs for you. Nokia is a threat at the other end. Would it be wise if that's what the West Indies go with, both the lefties together, Lewis and Gale?
Yeah, we've seen that from other teams against the West Indies. You think of Mohammad Hafiz, who's bowled a bit of off break at the start for Pakistan against the West Indies. So that's why they've invested in Chris Gale batting at number 3. They want to preserve a right-hand, left-hand combination at the top. It might not be the case in this game against South Africa, but I think you can have the best predetermined plans in T20 cricket. Shamsi obviously is a great threat with the ball, but you just never know. As a batsman, as a player in T20 cricket, you still got to assess the form of a particular bowler on the day, and that is where I think the West Indies need to put their thinking caps on. They need to assess everything as the game is unfolding and give themselves that advantage. What I would like to see is Dwayne Bravo getting more of a responsibility with the bat. We saw him in that first game bat ahead of Karen Pollard because of his right-handedness. That is the sort of innovative approach the West Indies has to, as a team, has to show in this game against South Africa. There's a fine line between being fearless and being reckless, and I think a lot of West Indians are expecting them to be fearless and calculated in their approach.
No, as it turns out, we've spent so much time on this pre-show discussing the West Indies batting because somehow it managed to be worse than South Africa's batting in the last game. Otherwise, we should have spent enough time discussing South Africa, who were tentative, not necessarily at their best against Australia, limped their way to 118, albeit made a fight out of it in the chase. But as we look at numbers for somebody like an Aiden Markram, who looks the best player amongst as far as that last game goes. Debate on where he stands, similar to the Chris Gale debate for the West Indies. Razi van der Dusen's position is also something that is debated often when it comes to South Africa. There's another problem they have here, Tom, which is it's not like they've got plenty of middle order options to replace either Heinrich Klaassen or David Miller. Looks like they've got to back once this set of players and go with them. What do you make of South Africa's batting? Does it seem like the pieces of the puzzle have come together?
Well, they haven't come together quite yet, but someone that I think has come together, and that's Markram. I think his form's been a revelation. We've heard for a number of years the promise and the talent that he possesses, and we've seen it slowly creep in other formats of the game. But it's only been recently we've seen it really evolve in T20 cricket. Where he bats, whether he opens or bats 3, I don't think is that relevant. What might be the case today, and that's because of the situation with Quinton de Kock, that may inject him back up into that opening position, and the middle order then sorts itself out from that inclusion. But he is one of the bright spots. But there are there's many others that need to also bring light to that batting order for South Africa, because against Australia, they looked, how can I put it? They just looked like they were overcautious and nearly, fearful of the consequences of being brave.
Yeah, I think one of the other things, Darren, that's been a problem for teams batting first is figuring out what sort of score to get. And you've got an opposition now in South Africa that have been tentative themselves. Does that in any way play into how much the West Indies think they need today?
Yeah, and it's the primary role of opening batsmen to assess the conditions and to send that message back to the dressing room that, hey, it's a 140 or 150 pitch. What we've seen in T20 internationals at Dubai, we've seen an average first innings score of about a 144, 150 thereabout. So you have to factor that into your play, your approach. Now, mind you, it's a day game, so dew is not going to be a factor. So batting second time around wouldn't add a significant advantage. What I like about this South African team is I saw this team play against the West Indies in 5 T20 internationals about 2 or 3 months before this World Cup, and they played together as a unified unit. And in particular, Aiden Markram, he has that right balance in terms of his ability to attack and also attack with less risk. That's why I think he brings that advantage in that top 3. So for me, in terms of Markram, it's not a matter as to if he opens or he bats at number 3. I think he can bat with the right tempo in the power play overs and not lose his wicket, which allows him to bat into the middle and go all the way through to the end. It will be even more important now for him to play this role, given the fact that Quinton de Kock is not playing. And then the other players like Rassie van der Dusen, I think he's better served playing that innings probably at number 5 in the lower order and just sort of rallying the power of a David Miller and the lower end of South Africa's batting so that they can get the right score if they're chasing.
All right. Well, as it turns out, someone was just being naughty on the broadcast because it is Simmons and Lewis that have walked out. So that's a waste of our time, at least for some point. But I'm sure we'll see Chris Gale sooner rather than later. Aiden Markram does have the ball in hand. All the same, the players have taken the knee. All the West Indians and the South Africans. Heinrich Klaassen has the gloves in Quinton de Kock's absence. Can't help but feeling there is a sentiment beyond cricket that is going to be around for this game, at least for South Africa. Let's see how they start. Give me a score, Tom Moody. What are the West Indies getting today? Something in excess of 55, perhaps?
Yeah, I think more than 55. You could put a 1 in front of it. So I'll go 155.
Very well. Daren?
Yeah, around 160. I think it's a new day, this West Indian side, with guys like Russell, Bravo, Pollard, guys in excess of 6K, T20 runs, 300 wickets. They're all round.
All right, let's assume that Darren's going to get enough of these, right? 160 at least. We'll pick up the chat with Daren Ganga and Tom Moody at halftime. Join us then on Maruti Suzuki presents ESPN Cricket for T20 Timeout, powered by Dell.
Watch more, feel more. Dell.